Hello, and welcome to If Grapes Could Talk, your one and only source into the corrupt lives of wine country's elite. And who am I? I'm Rye Alexander, and I'm a former aspiring insider on a journey to discover how corrupt wine country really is. And I hate long intros, so let's get right into today's video, which is about the murder of the beloved Sylvia Bracamonte in Cotati, California in March 2020. Today's content warning does include graphic description of violent murder. Usually I don't go into extreme detail, but today is a special circumstances. We will also be discussing suicidality, systemic violence such as racism, ableism, and misogyny. So of course I will be using strong language. And so to help me get through recording this, I have this wand, which was made in Sylvia's honor. All of the outfits that I will be wearing today are inspired by the colors. My understanding is that they were inspired by Sylvia's favorite colors, and I didn't want to just wear like black depressing clothing, so I tried to wear joyful things that Sylvia might have liked. Forget if I said that it was given to me by Stormy and that it was made in Sylvia's honor, and it's just very dear to me and I wanted to have it with me today. I'm also going to burn this candle. Focus? Maybe if I put it on my face it'll focus. This picture of Sylvia that I got at a vigil that I went to in Sylvia's honor. And so even when you can't see these things in the middle section of the video where I kind of strip things back to kind of go more newscaster, these things are still here to help me. So without further ado, here's a lot of, definitely not everything, I've learned so far about the murder of Sylvia Bracamonte. And I say so far because this is an ongoing case with multiple court dates in December, but we gotta get started somewhere. Let's do this. Let's begin with her life. And Sylvia was full of life. I didn't get to meet Sylvia until after she died. So to give you a sense of how loved she is, I'm going to read quotes from the people that did know her. I'm not going to show the screenshots to protect the identity of the people, but they were particularly meaningful to the family. So this first one is from a friend. One of my closest friends was murdered yesterday. Sylvia Bracamonte was a dynamic woman, a super mom to her 2 children, extremely intelligent and devoted to helping disadvantaged kids. And then this next one is from a former youth she helped. I feel really shocked I didn't know about this. She was a counselor at my high school. She is the reason I didn't drop out and kept pushing. She helped me enroll in community college when I graduated too. I feel so heartbroken and terrible. She didn't deserve that. And her kids. This last one is a journal entry from a former client of Sylvia's about meeting Sylvia. I was broken. I had nowhere to go. After being released from jail, I found myself without a home. I was able to be connected with Sylvia Bracamonte. This woman saw something in me that I didn't see at the time. She saw a light flickering, but still burning. I was immediately enamored by her personality and the compassion she clearly showed. She was able to get me into supportive housing that she managed. Sylvia became my advocate, my rock, my role model. On Friday, her life was taken right in front of me. My heart is hurting. I am upset, angry, and totally devastated. No words can describe how special Sylvia was to me. Getting to know her has been one of the most impactful things I've experienced. Her courage and generosity will forever be with me. I feel so terrible that her family and friends have lost such a beautiful person. To Sylvia, thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for nurturing me. Thank you for everything you did for me and for all my peers I now call family. Because she is so loved, I have been able to talk to so many people about her death, even though it is so emotionally difficult for them. But they also wrote things down in social media posts, in journals. One of them even wrote a thesis about her. Yes, really. One of my main resources that I'll be citing throughout this video is Raven Deverux' ethnographic work, Legacy Making, Resistance Building in System-Impacted Communities. And it is from this work that I pulled Sylvia's background information. Through her youth in Sonoma County, she was involved with gangs, drugs, and the carceral system. She experienced homelessness and overcame many obstacles as she started down the path towards eventually successfully earning a master's degree in social welfare. After the birth of her first child, Sylvia enrolled at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and she went on to become their first Chicana valedictorian. She then went on to earn 2 BAs at UC Berkeley in social welfare and ethnic studies, going on to earn a master's in social welfare. She was a Chicana Latina Foundation Scholarship awardee twice, a McNair Scholar, and more. Following her death, the UC Berkeley Underground Scholars Program created a scholarship in Sylvia's memory, which fills Sylvia's mother with pride. After completing her education, she wanted to make a difference in her community and return to Sonoma County. She accepted a position at local nonprofit Community Support Network, much more about them later, despite having serious qualms about the organization itself. From legacy building, she recognized she was working for a nonprofit organization owned by old wine money in the area, effectively serving to legitimize their superiority through charitable work. Still reading from Legacy Making, Sylvia had previously spoken to family about an awareness of her own tokenization. She had been hired to more closely reflect the Community Support Network served, a white organization that served youth of color. All of her identities, Chicana, social worker, formerly incarcerated, they informed how and why she died, and why her loved ones still don't have resolution almost 4 years later. I want to emphasize that Sylvia identified as Chicana, and especially at the end of her life, took the idea of decolonizing her mind very seriously and was connecting with her indigenous roots. And thus her death fits in within a broader pattern in American society in which Native and Indigenous women are disproportionately missing and murdered. Like I said, I didn't get to know Sylvia until after she died, but through the love of her community and their openness with me, I do genuinely feel as though I've gotten to know her. Through memory, through speaking her name, Sylvia lives and Sylvia watches over us. Whew. Okay, that was hard, and it's only gonna get harder from here. I'm now going to get into the facts of the case. Normally, I do not go into graphic detail, but because I am the first source to cover this story, I kind of have to. Please know that I have the support of her friends and family in doing so. To understand Sylvia's death, you first need to understand where it happened. In the kitchen, living room, and front yard of a group home known as Sanctuary House in Cotati, California, operated by the local nonprofit Community Support Network, which according to its website still runs 10 houses in Sonoma County, including Sanctuary House, which is still called Sanctuary House, despite what I'm about to tell you happened there. Sylvia's job was essentially to make Sanctuary House function for the residents. And for the most part, her clients adored her. One quote that really resonated with me was that she made Sanctuary House a home. So, what is Sanctuary House? To live there, you must meet the following criteria. Be 18 to 24 years old, qualify as homeless, have a mental health diagnosis, that one's important, earn $1,442 a month or less upon entry, willing to participate in clean and sober living environment, be medication compliant with doctor-prescribed medications, have no history of violence in the last 6 months, be willing to start working on personal goals, school, work, volunteer, etc. Be able to live fairly independently, managing schedule, taking on medication, buying on food, etc. And if they move in, they pay 30% of their rent as income. And if their income is zero, then yeah, they pay 30% of zero, which is zero. The accused, as I'll call him for the rest of the video, the person who killed Sylvia, his name is Anderson-Quinonez Cabeza, was one of the 6 residents of Sanctuary House, which means yes, he had a mental health diagnosis, and I'm going to withhold from speculating what that diagnosis is, and I would appreciate if you would join me in doing so should you choose to comment. However, throughout my research, I did come across evidence that he had a history of violence. I'm going to quote now from Legacy Making. Close family and friends reported knowledge of prior mental health hospital commitments of Sylvia's attacker. These individuals told family members when he would stay in the hospital, guards would stand outside his room as he was known to be a risk for harm. Case notes from investigations into Sylvia's death say that he is from El Salvador and that his primary language is Spanish. In fact, he used Google Translate to communicate with both Sylvia and other residents of Sanctuary House. He was 18 at the time of Sylvia's death, still a senior in high school. Like all of the other residents, he was a transition-aged youth there for support while transitioning from youth to adulthood. He had been there approximately 4 months. Before he killed her, he did make threatening comments to Sylvia, which she did report to her supervisor. Not much was done, is as neutral as I can bring myself to put that. From what I can tell, the main threat or threatening incident that Sylvia reported went as follows. So Sylvia and the accused were communicating via Google Translate. Recall the accused's primary language was Spanish, or is Spanish. So he said he had a dream where a man told him that if he didn't kill Sylvia, then this man would kill the accused's sister. And then Sylvia said after Google Translate translated this, something demonic happened, and this made Sylvia's hair stand on edge. At least one friend and myself have speculated that perhaps Sylvia's experience of this in mystical terms led to Community Support Network's minimization of a report a client was having dreams telling them to kill a social worker. My understanding is that she did use more strong spiritual language when talking with friends and family than talking with Community Support Network. But to be clear, I am not just taking Sylvia's friends and family's word for it that she told her supervisor, though I do believe them. Because she died at her workplace, Sylvia's death was automatically investigated by the I can never remember, by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which I will from now on call OSHA. And OSHA is a federal agency. And through Sylvia's family, I was able to obtain case notes in the interviews conducted as part of this investigation. And in these notes, Sylvia's direct supervisor reports that Sylvia reported a demonic incident. Clinical director Lisa Planting did say that Sylvia felt freaked out. And the fact that the clinical director knew does indicate Sylvia's supervisor had escalated the situation upon having it reported to her. Also of interest from these case notes is that the accused had a prior history in his records. He was suicidal because he had thought about killing his whole family. This is referred to as a history of delusion, but not necessarily violence. Throughout my interviews, there was a recurring theme in which suicidality was not taken seriously or as a risk factor for future harm by Community Support Network. And as someone who has lost loved ones to suicide, I find that deeply disturbing. And I can't not say something. And so why wasn't more done even though Community Support Network was aware of the incident? Let's see. So when asked to assess the situation that had Sylvia freaked out and how dangerous it was, the clinical director said, the accused is a sweet, sad kid still in high school. So it just doesn't sound like they saw him as dangerous for whatever reason. Editing Rye checking in to correct news anchor Rye, who initially told the following story incorrectly, but it's too important for me to leave out, so I'm gonna try again. So according to one of Sylvia's family members, Sylvia once confided that she had asked her direct supervisor what to do if she ever were physically attacked by a resident of Sanctuary House. And the supervisor did show her a drawer somewhere in the house that had tools such as scissors and maybe even a hammer that could be used if she were ever attacked. So when you combine that with the case notes from the interview with clinical director of Sanctuary House, Lisa Planting, I just see this picture, this all too common picture, where the people that are closest to this situation, meaning Sylvia and her direct supervisor, are fully aware and preparing for the threat of physical attack. And those further from the situation, the clinical director and the executive director, who spend much less time with the residents, they can't won't see the accused as a threat. And whether that's basic incompetence or something more sinister, the impact is the same. So no, the testimony from clinical director Lisa Planting, the testimony that the accused was just a sweet, sad kid, it doesn't add up to me, it doesn't make sense to me, but we have to move on. The last thing of note from the case notes is that the accused did not seem to have the best relationship with Sylvia, which was an anomaly. Everyone else who lived in the house spoke of her as one of the best, if not the best, social worker they had ever interacted with. Now, part of the disconnect between him, Sylvia, the rest of the house was the language barrier. Recall, his primary language was Spanish and he did most of his communication through Google Translate. However, he did just seem to want to keep to himself. One resident said that he would say things like, "You don't want to get to know me, I'm a bad guy." And according to the notes from the interview with Executive Director Tom Bieri, the accused was on a 30-day notice of some sort with the county for not getting along with the other residents. This may have been related to the fact that the accused was sneaking a underage girlfriend from the high school into his room, and there was conflict between him and Sylvia because as part of her job, she had to address that with him. So now you have the scene and the main cast of characters. A young man with a history of violent, intrusive thoughts in housing for non-violent, transitional-aged youth. There's tension with the people he lives with and with the housing representative he most interacts with. Even though she was considered one of the best by clients and colleagues alike. And on March 20th, 2020, he stabbed her to death. And this is one of the rare incidences where there's no disagreement on that. I'll now get into the actual description of her death. My description of day of events are based on the OSHA notes, legacy making, and interviews with Sanctuary House residents. March 20th, 2020 had already been a hard day for the residents of Sanctuary House. The day before, March 19th, 2020, was the day California Governor Gavin Newsom issued shelter-in-place orders for the state of California in response to COVID-19. So Sylvia was doing her best to help the residents feel better, even though it was her day off. She took one resident to get cleaning supplies, she helped throw a pizza party, even going to pick up pizzas after a homemade attempt went awry. She'd also stopped at the bank to pick up quarters for the laundry machines, which, not the point, but why? Why were they quarter-operated laundry machines? Okay, this is not the point, and I'm gonna move on. So Sylvia arrives at Sanctuary House around 11:45 a.m., runs errands, gets a party going. Everyone's acting normal, or at least their version of it. And around 3 p.m., while everyone's eating pizza, there's a phone call. According to the resident who answered the call, it was Sonoma County Behavioral Health, and they were asking for the accused. I do not know what was said during the phone call, but I'm not the only one who believes that what was said on the phone call is what triggered him into a violent rage. While he was on the phone, the party broke up and the residents dispersed throughout the property. The accused obtained a knife from the kitchen and attacked Sylvia in her office. He then ran throughout the property, telling the other residents to leave. However, since he was doing so in Spanish, it was very confusing and residents didn't understand what he was saying. While he did this, Sylvia may have gone into the kitchen to obtain a knife to defend herself. At some point, it appears she reached out to the clinical director. Eventually, Sylvia escaped through the living room and out onto the front yard. The accused continued to attack and stab her even on the front lawn. By that point, the other residents had sprung into action. They called 911, they went to the nearby fire station, they administered first aid. I'm now going to read a quote from Legacy Making. Witnesses recall Sylvia was alive and verbalizing at the time. Despite the facility being across the street from the fire department, a well-known sore spot in the community with the nickname the Halfway House, the fire truck went the wrong way initially. And in one interview for Legacy Making, a resident recalls Sylvia asking why this had happened. The fire truck arrived before the police, despite, again, having gone the wrong way. A first responder, I believe a police officer, did tell the resident performing CPR to stop, which led a resident to ask another first responder to administer CPR or do something. And he said, "Not in my job description," or something like that. The police focused on securing the scene and detaining the accused, so an ambulance did not arrive until after he was gone. When I re-interviewed one of these witnesses and asked if Sylvia could have been saved, the response was, "It's more so that no one tried." Just sit with that. No one tried. It would be easier to say whether or not she could have been saved if her time of death was clearer. However, reading again from Legacy Making, she died sometime between 3:45 and 4 p.m. There have been 2 death certificates issued, one with the time of death closer to the 53-minute mark and one closer to the 45-minute mark. And it appears the 45-minute one is the one that is being treated as the official time of death. Reading from the OSHA report now, at approximately 3:45 p.m. on March 20th, 2020, an employee was doing some administrative duties, they're talking about Sylvia, and getting quarters so the residents could do their laundry. One of the residents threatened the employee. The employee sent a text message to the co-worker about the situation with the resident. The employee continued to try to de-escalate the situation with the resident, and the resident obstructed the single point of egress from the office located in the residence. The resident then stabbed the employee using a knife multiple times. The employee was killed. That evening, the remaining residents of Sanctuary House were taken to another home operated by both Community Support Network and TLC, another local nonprofit. They were driven there by Dr. Planting, who allegedly violated the accused's HIPAA rights or privacy rights on the drive over. It was unclear to the residents when they would have relatively stable housing again. One resident said the message felt like, "Figure your life out because you might not have a place to live." The 3 Sanctuary House residents were provided with extra food and counseling. However, because this context was not explained to the other residents in the house, this caused tension. It looked like the Sanctuary House residents were getting special treatment. Not that their treatment was all that special, especially when you realized what they'd been going through. I had mentioned they received extra counseling. Unfortunately, the counselor was described as condescending, out of touch, and the kind of white lady who tells black and brown youth that they are surprisingly articulate. In general, there was a lack of empathy from those in power for the traumatized residents of Sanctuary House. As a result of the untreated trauma, at least one of the former residents of Sanctuary House's mental health is at the point that I can't even contact them for potential interview. Yes, they're alive, but they're not okay, and I will leave it at that. Community Support Network also showed a lack of empathy in how it treated Sylvia's family following her death. Traditionally in murder cases, law enforcement officers and maybe even a priest are involved in communicating the death of a loved one to the family member. However, Community Support Network decided to take that on themselves. And not that I'm the hugest fan of police departments in general, but credit where credit is due. When I looked up general practices, you absolutely can expect for them to show you the respect of telling you to your face. That was consistent at all of the resources I found. Sylvia's mother, Stormy, was told about her daughter's death over the phone. She had been contacted by Tom Bieri, Executive Director of Community Support Network. She says she immediately knew who did it. She had been worried about Sylvia's safety. When she received the phone call, Sylvia's mom, Stormy, told Tom to come tell her to her face, which he did. He also attempted to discuss money and paperwork, which she found offensive and refused to engage. Tom is still the Executive Director of Community Support Network, and he is named in the lawsuits against Community Support Network that have been filed by Sylvia's family, which I will be discussing later in the video. Because she is so loved, word of Sylvia's death quickly spread throughout the community. When I gained access to her phone, I found a mountain of unread text messages, direct messages on social media that started almost immediately following her death, from friends and colleagues, family, all saying things like, "Please tell me it isn't true." Reading again from Legacy Making. A Facebook thread on Sylvia's profile created on March 19th, 2020 became a central location for validation as comments began to grow, speaking to sadness and shock that this beautiful, honest, and vulnerable reflection of motherhood would be her last post. And because she died in March 2020 following these shelter-in-place orders, Sylvia's friends and family couldn't come together in a normal way to grieve. However, this did not stop Sylvia's loved ones from fighting to honor her. I'm going to read again from Legacy Making, and in this passage, I'll be referring to Sylvia as Huitzilin, which is a Nahua word, Nahua being an Aztec language for hummingbird. And the word was chosen to honor Sylvia's work fighting for social justice and against colonialism. The first organized collective event following Huitzilin's murder was a courthouse protest. This event was not a demand for the exercise of a penal power, but a demand for social justice. Those in attendance sought to call out all responsible for the layers of violence that resulted in Huitzilin's murder. Blood of Huitzilin was on the hands of the state and all liable institutions, the first responders and capital, and the nonprofit organization that failed to protect both Huitzilin and her murderer. This is not to say that the individual who committed this act was not responsible, and sentiments toward him varied given the large representation of abolitionist-oriented mourners. Further motivations were to allow for Huitzilin's mother to be present. Due to the recency of shelter-in-place orders, the Santa Rosa courthouse where the murderer was arraigned was not allowing any additional persons in the courtroom and had not yet set up virtual procedures. Courthouse demonstrations are often oriented around the verdict of a given trial. What brought friends and family out on that misty day in late March was a mixed bag of motivation, however. For most, what was key was visibility and making sure that those in local positions of power knew we were paying attention and would not stay silent. That was 2020. This is 2023. So where do things stand? Over 3 years later, the criminal case against the accused still hasn't gone to trial. More on that later. However, OSHA did conduct that investigation into the workplace death. They did find Community Support Network liable, and they charged them, $14,400, a pittance. CSN appealed, and from what I can tell from the website, the appeal hasn't been investigated and the fine has not been paid, so it's still an open case. They were found liable because, among other things, they didn't have a formal security system. There wasn't like a proper exit in Sylvia's office, like a back exit. The part that I found most interesting, they were found in violation because they were found to be a mental health facility that wasn't up to mental health code. And the crux of Executive Director Tom Bieri's defense of Community Support Network is that it's not a mental health facility. It's a facility serving people with mental health challenges that is not a mental health facility. That's their defense. This is not me going out of my way to make them look bad. Executive Director Bieri does acknowledge that Sanctuary House probably wasn't necessarily set up to meet the accused's needs. Let's just look back at these case notes. The question is CSN, Community Support Network, adequately staffed to handle incidents of workplace violence? The notes on Bieri's response say, so this isn't a direct quote, I'm pulling from the notes. Sonoma County is attempting to require employer, that's Community Support Network, to take residents on referral with higher level of acuity in housing that is not set up for it. CSN is pushing back. This violates the most recent HUD, Housing and Urban Development, another federal agency, guidelines that says clinicians need to be able to make decisions. So if I'm interpreting that correctly, the executive director of Community Support Network was asked if CSN was set up to handle violent incidents, and he didn't answer the question, instead accusing the county of violating federal guidelines, while admitting there have been multiple incidents of the county trying to send them referrals they're not set up for. The results of this investigation did really leave the door open for Sylvia's family to file the suits that they did against the county and community support network. However, neither the civil suits or the trial have gone to trial, like I mentioned already. A lot of the delays are related to the procedures of the county figuring out if the accused is mentally able to stand trial to be sent to jail, and to my knowledge, the accused has been waiting for the county to get its act together and finish the procedures it needs to do to determine if he's fit to stand trial to be sent to jail in jail. Yet another example of our justice system making no sense. The garbage pickup that you can hear right now in the background is a metaphor for how garbage the county of Sonoma is. And look, I know even when everyone is operating in good faith, the criminal justice system can be slow. But I'm recording this the week that I'm seeing headlines about Sonoma County district attorneys being able to quite efficiently put a 16-year-old Latino high school student who may have been being bullied on trial for a crime he committed March 1st, 2023, almost 3 years exactly after Sylvia's death. So I'm just having a really hard time buying the procedural delays runaround right this second. And the majority of these delays have been procedural or related to personnel issues and somewhat difficult for me, again, as a layperson, I'm not a lawyer, to follow. But here's a non-exhaustive list of the reasons that Sylvia's family has been given for the delays. So the initial DA had to drop the case after she was busy with a jury trial. And as bad as that sounds, because plan ahead, Sylvia's community was actually relieved. They didn't really get along with her and she seemed to look down on them, have her own elitism issue. A public defender left to become a judge. Most recently, and I'm still figuring out what is going on with this, a conflict of interest led the accused being reassigned a Marin County public defender. Now, I do buy that there's conflict of interest with Sonoma County, but I don't know how a Marin County public defender solves that. Okay, editing right here, I am literally just gonna put a random image over my face because I'm doing this so haphazardly, but yeah, I just went to double check that there's no update on who the accused attorney is. There was an update. It's Orchid Vashti. I don't know how to pronounce that, but you'll see from the image how it's spelled. That's 14-time alleged sexual predator, former Windsor mayor, and potential Christopher Creek winery owner, unclear what the actual status of that is, Dominic Fipoli's defense attorney. And I don't know what to do with that information. I will definitely be following up on it. And yeah, have I mentioned that this is a tangled web? Okay, back to normal, Rye. Anyway, I do tend to assume that the delays in the civil suit are because of delays in the criminal case, and the findings of the criminal case would impact the civil suit. But again, I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. But if there's one thing to be said about the delays in these court cases, these delays benefit the people whose negligence contributed to Sylvia's death. They saw the protests, they saw the love, and I think they were afraid. I'm not saying they delayed things on purpose. It doesn't matter whether it's on purpose or classic bureaucratic inefficiency. The function is the same. They hope the people forget. Well, it didn't work. It's 3 years later. We're still here. Justice for Sylvia. I don't need a decision from our fucked up justice system that can't even put 14-time alleged sexual predator Dominic Fipoli on trial to understand who's to blame for Sylvia's death. After reading government documents, interviewing friends, family, and clients, and just thinking about this a lot. This is Community Support Network's fault. This is the County of Sonoma's fault. I could keep listing institutions, and I will in future videos. This is a failure by those in positions of authority with fiduciary responsibility that they take more seriously than their responsibility to their fellow humans. From higher education to local, state, federal government. That's what the social justice warriors, or at least me, and I've been called a social justice warrior quite a few times in my life, both in positive and pejorative contexts. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about systemic injustice. Failure on every level, to the point you realize the system isn't failing. It's just not designed to work for us. It's meant to maintain elites' control and domination over us. So I have questions about the ongoing donors to Community Support Network who donate to the campaigns of the same politicians in the county of Sonoma year after year after year, who own media outlets, who called Community Support Network one of the best places to work, and why it's so many of the same people who have ties to other corrupt institutions I was covering because of other stories. So if this is your first video of mine, thank you for watching. Thank you for making it this far. My next video, or one of my next few videos, I'll be explaining how this story about Sylvia's death connects to my previous work contextualizing my experiences with leaders in wine country protecting sexual predators. So consider subscribing, and in the interest of brevity, I'll leave the wine country elites are the fucking worst portion of this video at that. And let's talk about the future of these court cases. I know Sylvia would want me to be honest. There isn't really a good outcome in the criminal case against the accused, because our justice system is just about maintaining the power imbalances that left Sylvia vulnerable to death in the first place. I am in no way trying to downplay the severity of what he's done. He murdered someone. However, the accused's life is incredibly sad for me to have read about. And it highlighted additional injustices within social programs in our country. Sylvia was aware of the context and danger of social work, and it is particularly dangerous because field workers like Sylvia are underpaid and under-resourced. She understood that when people don't have access to help, that's when they can become monsters. And it's just a very sad, frustrating situation. But I want the legal process to be over, and it looks like the courts may need some encouragement to make that happen. The next two court dates are coming right up. December 6th at 8:30 a.m. for the criminal case against the accused. And then December 12th at 3:30 p.m. there is a hearing for the civil suits against County of Sonoma Community Support Network by Sylvia's family. And I will be using Facebook and Instagram to give people more frequent updates about what's going on with the court cases, keep you updated on when court dates are, all that good stuff. So those are linked below if you are interested in that kind of coverage. As for Community Support Network, the county, what does accountability look like for them? Well, losing the civil suits would be a start, but it's certainly not enough in my opinion. What does institutional accountability even look like when they're both kind of admitting that a mistake was made, both meaning Community Support Network and the County of Sonoma, but Community Support Network, through its executive director, Tom Bieri, is pointing the finger at the County of Sonoma. Look, the rampant disregard for the life and dignity for the working and lower classes of wine country is heinous. We have the wealth in wine country to fund social services, period. If we don't have the money, who fucking does? The problem isn't lack of potential funding. Fuck it, here we go again. It's the elitism of the people who control the funding, the arrogance, the lack of empathy. I don't need to call them names, they are just bad people, as in they have gone bad. They are rotten to the core. Let's hold them accountable together. So, if you haven't yet, subscribe. I've got those social media links down below. I only do Facebook and Instagram because I kind of hate social media. Like I said, I'm doing ongoing coverage of Sylvia's case. I have other cases that I cover, and I'm building towards a mega video where I explain how all of this is connected. And I'm really going to focus because, have I mentioned, this is important. So, until my next video, you know you love me. XOXO.